I sat in the deeply opulent, private dining room of a Michelin-starred restaurant in downtown Chicago, watching my mother swirl her highly expensive glass of vintage wine. She smiled warmly at my sister's future mother-in-law before suddenly pointing her perfectly manicured finger directly across the table at me. "This is our oldest daughter," Brenda announced, her voice dripping with artificial, saccharine sweetness that barely concealed the heavy venom underneath. "She cleans houses for a living." My father, Richard, chuckled loudly, taking a sip of his scotch, and added, "We have basically given up on her, but someone has to scrub the floors, right?" "Wait," the executive whispered, her brow furrowing in sudden profound recognition. "Are not you the woman who—" I immediately caught her eye, maintaining absolute, sub-zero composure, and gave a single, barely perceptible shake of my head. She stopped mid-sentence, her intelligent eyes widening in absolute realization before a slow, highly calculating, almost predatory smile spread across her flawless face. To fully understand how we ended up at this disastrous, humiliating engagement dinner, you have to understand the dynamic of my family. They lived exclusively for elite country club memberships, luxury European cars leased on terrible, predatory terms, and the exhausting, constant illusion of immense generational wealth. The definitive breaking point occurred when I was just 19 years old. My parents secretly, illegally drained my college savings account to desperately pay off Madison's hidden credit card debts and fully fund her lavish, documented gap year in Europe. When I eventually found out that the money my grandparents had left me was gone, I was devastated. I confronted them, demanding an explanation. My mother simply crossed her arms and told me that family sacrifices for family, and that I could easily take out predatory student loans to fund my own education. Instead of fighting a pathetic, losing battle against their united front of intense narcissism, I quietly packed my bags in the dead of night, moved into a cheap, freezing studio apartment in a terrible neighborhood, and started an independent cleaning business just to survive the winter. For the next 15 years, my parents proudly, maliciously told everyone in their affluent social circle that I was a pathetic college dropout who scrubbed rich people's toilets for a meager living. They never realized that my tiny, desperate little cleaning service had rapidly evolved into Luminina Estate Management, a premier corporation managing commercial properties and ultra-luxury estates across the country. My parents, on the other hand, were desperately, pathetically trying to impress Yvonne and Terrence. Madison sat closely next to Terrence, wearing a flashy designer dress she definitely could not afford on her own, flawlessly playing the role of the perfect, innocent, blushing bride-to-be. "Yvonne, we are just so incredibly thrilled Terrence found our Madison," my mother said, her voice echoing loudly in the intimate private room. "She has always been the highly ambitious one in our family. Our little brilliant entrepreneur. We always knew she was destined for greatness." Yvonne smiled politely, maintaining a highly professional facade, taking a slow sip of her sparkling water. "And what about you, Cassidy?" Yvonne asked, suddenly turning her incredibly sharp, highly analytical gaze directly to me. "Madison briefly mentioned that you work in the service industry." "This is our oldest daughter," Brenda announced to the table, her tone laced with incredibly undisguised contempt. "She cleans houses for a living. We desperately try to encourage her to go back to school and make something of herself, but some people simply lack basic ambition." My father, Richard, laughed loudly, violently cutting into his massive steak. "We have pretty much completely given up on her," he added cheerfully, as if discussing a broken lawnmower. "But hey, someone has to scrub the dirty floors, right?" As a senior banking executive who personally handled multi-million-dollar corporate real estate portfolios, Yvonne possessed an extensive, exclusive professional network. And just last week, my corporation, Luminina Estate Management, had officially signed a 9-figure contract to manage her bank's sprawling chain of commercial properties across the Midwest. "Wait," Yvonne whispered, leaning forward slightly, the pieces rapidly snapping together in her brilliant mind. Are not you the woman who handles the massive cleaning contracts for the Kensington properties?" Yvonne pivoted flawlessly, smoothly naming an incredibly wealthy, highly influential family in her elite social circle. I hear you do a very thorough, highly impressive job. Yvonne turned her sharp gaze to my mother, her tone shifting from polite to commanding. All honest work is respectable, Brenda. You should be proud she is making an honest living. Well, yes, Brenda stammered nervously, her confidence heavily shaken. But we just wish she would actively apply herself and build a legacy like Madison. The remainder of the expensive dinner was in masterclass in suppressed, awkward tension. She went on and on about how it was the most luxurious, prestigious property in the state, unaware that she was talking about a property my corporation had acquired just 30 days prior. Terence remained unusually quiet, his trained eyes occasionally darting to his mother, clearly sensing that Yvonne knew something vital that he did not. The facade my family had meticulously constructed was beginning to show its cracks, and I was content to sit back, finish my dessert, and watch them enthusiastically lay the groundwork for their own spectacular destruction. The dessert plates were quietly cleared away by the highly trained waitstaff, leaving only the soft clinking of expensive crystal and the low, elegant murmur of other patrons in the restaurant. She tossed her highlighted hair over her shoulder and leaned significantly closer to Terence, ensuring Yvonne had a front-row seat to her highly fabricated performance. I am just so passionate about curating lifestyle experiences, Madison beamed, using her hands wildly to emphasize her empty words. My boutique is all about intense corporate synergy and vertical integration. We are looking at a truly return on investment by Q3. I mean, scaling a premium brand in today's volatile economic climate takes a true visionary. She strung the heavy corporate buzzwords together, like incredibly cheap, highly fragile beads on a necklace. Anyone with a single ounce of actual business acumen could tell immediately that she was just reciting random phrases she had skimmed from a cheap motivational podcast without understanding their actual functional application. It takes a very special, rare kind of intellect to run a business, Brenda announced loudly, her voice cutting through the ambient noise. She reached over and patted Madison's hand. Madison has always had that drive, unlike some people who are pathetically content scrubbing other people's dirty baseboards for minimum wage. Richard chuckled loudly, swirling his expensive scotch. Well, the world desperately needs ditch diggers too, Brenda. Cassidy finally found her level. We accept it, you know, Cassidy, Yvonne began, her voice smooth, deliberate and laced with intent. Since you spend so much of your time maintaining properties, I am curious about your specific perspective. My bank is currently evaluating a portfolio of complex historic commercial buildings downtown. We are running into endless, expensive issues with intense structural depreciation and rigid local zoning ordinances. She leaned forward, locking her eyes directly onto mine. It is an absolute nightmare trying to heavily retrofit modern HVAC systems into buildings erected in the 1920s without completely violating historical preservation codes. Have you ever encountered anything remotely like that in your specific line of work? Historical preservation codes are certainly rigid, I replied, my tone conversational, but, however, the city recently passed a specific amendment to Section 4 of the major zoning regulations. If you classify the HVAC retrofitting as essential structural stabilization rather than a basic cosmetic upgrade, you can bypass the historical board's primary review process. I paused, holding Yvonne's intense gaze. Furthermore, if your bank utilizes the Federal Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit, you can instantly offset 20% of those retrofitting costs. The key is ensuring your paid contractors use ductless mini-split systems, which require minimal architectural intrusion and instantly, legally satisfy the Preservation Committee's stringent visual guidelines. Is that right? Yvonne said, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. Section 4, you say? I will have my legal team look into that loophole on Monday morning. That is remarkably insightful, valuable advice from someone who just cleans houses. I offered her a polite, incredibly modest smile. You pick up a few things when you pay close attention to the deep foundations, I replied smoothly. Cassidy reads a lot of magazines while she waits endlessly for the city bus, Brenda snapped, waving a heavily manicured hand dismissively. Let us absolutely not get off track, Madison. Tell Yvonne about the massive new marketing campaign you are launching next month. $4,500, Madison whispered, loudly enough for the highly judgmental neighboring tables to hear clearly. Oh my gosh, she stammered loudly, pulling out her phone and furiously tapping the bright screen. My bank just sent me an incredibly urgent alert. They completely locked my primary credit card. They think it is fraudulent activity because of all the massive wedding vendors I aggressively paid earlier today. She looked up at Terrence with wide, watery eyes, playing the helpless victim flawlessly. Baby, I am so embarrassed my accounts are frozen until Monday morning. Terrence reached heavily for his wallet absolutely without hesitation. I can absolutely cover it, Madison, do not deeply worry about it at all. But my intensely proud mother rapidly intervened. Brenda slammed her hand on the table, her rings clinking loudly against the wood. Not, Terrence. You are the honored guest tonight. We would never ever ask you to pay for your own engagement dinner. We are intense traditionalists. Terrence looked heavily relieved but deeply confused. If you strongly insist, Mrs. Brenda, you clean rich people's houses, Cassidy, Richard said, his voice loud and dripping with venom. You must get plenty of cash tips from your wealthy, careless clients. Go ahead and pay for your sister, consider it your wedding gift to her, since you probably cannot afford anything off their expensive registry anyway. Brenda nodded vigorously, her eyes gleaming with intense malice. You have no husband, no mortgage, and you live in some tiny, pathetic apartment. You have no real expenses. Be a useful older sister for once in your miserable life and take care of this. The sheer, staggering audacity of their demand hung in the air. Madison sniffled loudly, wiping away a fake tear, desperately waiting for me to pull out a handful of crumpled $20 bills and beg the train waiter for a desperate payment plan. Terrence leaned forward, his sharp legal mind snapping into focus. His brilliant brain was working in overdrive, desperately trying to reconcile the pathetic narrative of a struggling house cleaner with the reality of a powerful woman dropping a solid titanium centurion card on a $4,500 dinner without a second thought. Well, Brenda huffed loudly, crossing her arms and rolling her eyes. I hope that pathetic prepaid debit card has enough funds loaded on it. I would hate for the restaurant to decline it and embarrass us even further. Right away, madam, he murmured respectfully, actively hurrying off to highly process the massive payment immediately. The dinner is fully paid for, I said, keeping my voice steady and commanding. Congratulations on your rushed engagement, Madison. I am sure your wedding will be an unforgettable, revealing event. Terrence stood aggressively up abruptly, actively opening his mouth to speak. Cassidy, heavily wait, how do you? I did not give him the chance to finish his desperate sentence. I stepped out into the cool Chicago night air, leaving Terrence to drown in his mounting suspicions, and my parents utterly oblivious to the empire they had just insulted. The crisp Chicago wind hit my face forcefully as I confidently handed my valet ticket to the attentive attendant. I had just successfully initiated a chain reaction that would inevitably dismantle my family's facade, and I felt nothing but pure, unadulterated clarity. Before the valet could even turn to retrieve my vehicle, the ornate glass and brass doors of the expensive restaurant swung open behind me. She had deliberately left Terrence and our pathetic parents inside at the table, clearly unable to let the evening end without desperately getting the final word. You think you are so clever, Madison hissed loudly, closing the distance between us, throwing down some flashy metal corporate card just to pay the bill. Mom and Dad might not understand how level business expenses work, but I do. I know for a fact that is just a basic prepaid expense account your wealthy clients give you to buy bulk wholesale bleach and cheap floor wax. You probably maxed out your pathetic company budget just to show off in front of my future mother-in-law. Is there an actual specific reason you aggressively followed me out here, Madison? I asked, my incredibly calm voice completely devoid of any emotion. She scoffed loudly, crossing her manicured arms over her chest. Yes, actually, since you deliberately decided to make a spectacle of yourself tonight, you can make it up to me by making yourself useful for the wedding. I waited, letting the freezing silence stretch between us. I knew whatever demand came out of her mouth next was going to be remarkably audacious. But even my analytical mind underestimated her sheer staggering entitlement. We booked the Vanguard estate for the ceremony and the reception, Madison announced loudly, lifting her chin with intense pride. It is exclusive, Madison continued, leaning in much closer. And the new ownership is notoriously about intense property maintenance. They require the venue to be immaculate before the expensive vendors can even begin setting up the floral arrangements and the complex staging. She sneered at me. Terrence's powerful family is paying a fortune for the catering, so the least you can do is pull your pathetic weight. Our parents have sacrificed everything for me, so you owe us this. I stared at her, my calm face still. Are you asking me to clean your wedding venue? I am telling you to bring your little pathetic maid service to the estate 3 days before the wedding. Madison corrected sharply. You will do a full clean of the grand ballroom, the expend bridal suites, and the main terrace. And obviously you are doing it for free. Consider it your intense sisterly duty. It will serve as your actual wedding gift to me, since we both know you cannot afford anything off my expensive registry. Madison was standing on a freezing Chicago sidewalk berating me, demanding my free, manual labor to scrub the dirty floors of a multi-million-dollar venue, simply so she could pretend to be a wealthy billionaire bride. She did not know that 30 days ago my corporation, Luminina Estate Management, had executed a hostile, ruthless corporate takeover of the hospitality group that previously managed that property. She did not know that the notorious new ownership she was complaining about was actually me. A slow, eerie, predatory smile slowly spread across my face. It was the specific kind of dangerous smile that usually made my corporate rivals sweat in intense fear, but Madison was far too self-absorbed to recognize the danger standing right in front of her. You are right, Madison, I said smoothly, my calm voice as smooth as fine silk. Family is important, and I want your wedding day to be what you deserve. I will personally make sure my trained team is there. We will do a thorough sweep of the estate. Madison looked slightly taken aback by my easy, unexpected compliance, but her fragile ego quickly pushed any suspicions aside. She smirked, flipping her highlighted hair over her shoulder. See, that wasn't so hard, she said intensely condescendingly. Just make sure you use the discreet service entrance at the back of the property. I do not want Terrence's wealthy family seeing my pathetic sister hauling dirty trash bags around. You are just there to clean up, Cassidy. Stay out of sight. I will be out of sight, I promised softly, looking into her eyes. Until the moment, I did not give her the intense satisfaction of a defensive answer. I handed the respectful valet a crisp, brand-new $100 bill, slid smoothly into the expensive driver's seat, and pulled the door shut with a satisfying thud. I will see you at the Vanguard Estate, Madison, I said smoothly. I promise you it will be a day you never ever forget. I rolled the window up, shifted the expensive car into gear, and pulled away from the freezing curb. I left her standing alone on the cold pavement, shivering in the freezing wind, confused and furious. As I drove through the glittering city streets toward my expensive, secure penthouse, my analytical mind shifted from defense to explosive offense. She did not know she had just handed the keys to her fake facade to the ultimate executioner. My parents had stolen from me, belittled me, and used me for over a decade. Now they were going to walk willingly into a trap built of their own intense vanity, inside a fortress that I exclusively owned. I sat behind my polished obsidian desk, meticulously reviewing the final, complex acquisition and transition documents exclusively for the Vanguard estate. Everything was operating with flawless precision. I need your actual social security number, and a secure digital signature sent to my email immediately. Brenda barked, bypassing the basic hello. I leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair, my trained eyes quickly scanning a multi-million-dollar vendor contract displayed on my monitor. Good morning to you too, Mother. To what do I owe this urgent, invasive demand for my sensitive personal information? Do not use that condescending tone with me, Brenda snapped loudly, the sound of rustling expensive fabric and intense background chatter echoing through the speaker. Madison finally found her dream wedding dress, It is an custom haute couture gown imported from an exclusive designer in Paris. It is stunning, and it is going to make Terrence's wealthy family realize what caliber of woman they are welcoming into their elite home. And how does Madison's expensive dress require my secure personal signature? I asked smoothly, my voice dangerously calm. The exclusive bridal boutique requires a co-signer exclusively for the financing, Brenda explained rapidly, her tone dripping with intense irritation. Madison currently has all her assets tied up in her booming business right now. And your father and I are moving some investments around to pay for the expensive floral arrangements. The dress is $50,000. The financing company just needs a secure secondary signature to push the approval through today. Since you have no mortgage and no real expenses living in your tiny apartment, your basic credit score should be clean enough to act as a guarantor. I will not be signing any financing documents, Mother, I replied evenly unbothered. If Madison cannot afford a $50,000 dress, she should perhaps look for something within her actual, pathetic budget, you selfish, ungrateful brat. Brenda shrieked loudly, her voice echoing shrilly in my spacious executive office. You owe your sister. After you dropped out of college, you became a burden. We had to intensely suffer the embarrassment of telling all our wealthy friends that our eldest daughter was a pathetic failure who scrubbed dirty toilets. This is the basic least you can do to repay us for the shame you caused this family. I did not drop out, I said, my smooth voice dropping a terrifying octave, slicing through her hysterical shouting like a freshly sharpened razor. I was administratively withdrawn because my tuition checks bounced. You simply could not handle the intense academic pressure. Brenda scoffed, desperately attempting to rewrite history the way she always did. Do not attempt to gaslight me, Mother. We both know what actually happened, I countered, my sharp tone leaving no room for debate. I had a prestigious partial academic scholarship. I relied on the college trust fund that my wealthy grandparents legally left exclusively in my actual name to cover my expensive housing, my textbooks, and the remaining tuition. But when I went to the bank during my intense sophomore year to pay my university fees, the account was utterly empty. You and Richard illegally forged my secure signature, I continued coldly, laying out the devastating facts. You illegally bypassed the trust restrictions and drained $80,000 from my account. You stole my college fund to desperately pay off the catastrophic credit card debts Madison racked up during her reckless freshman year. You drained my future just to buy her an expensive luxury SUV, simply so she would not look poor in front of her superficial sorority sisters. You left me with $0, an eviction notice from my dorm, and a tuition debt I simply could not pay. That is why I was forced to clean houses. I had to scrub biohazards off dirty floors just to desperately buy basic groceries while you happily paraded Madison around the expensive country club. You are twisting the past. Brenda yelled loudly, though her shrill voice shook with the undeniable panic of a guilty woman whose deepest, most sins had just been exposed to the harsh light of day. Madison needed that car exclusively for her social standing. She was networking with important people. You were studying something useless. Family sacrifices for family. We simply did what we had to do to protect Madison's future. And I did what I had to do to survive the intense destruction of mine, I replied flawlessly. You made your definitive choice 15 years ago. You chose to sacrifice me to fund her delusions. You do not get to come back now and demand my secure credit score to fund her expensive wedding dress. If you do not sign this loan document right now, I will officially ban you from attending the expensive wedding reception. Brenda threatened, utilizing her favorite weapon. You will use the discreet service entrance at the Vanguard estate. You will clean the grand ballroom in silence, and then you will leave through the back door, like the pathetic hired help you truly are. You will be dead to this family. I will not be signing anything, I said, my voice a whisper of pure ice. Good luck with the dress, Mother. Yes, boss. My highly brilliant chief financial officer. David answered aggressively, immediately. David, I said, keeping my intense gaze tightly locked on the glittering city skyline outside my window. I need you to place an maximum security lock and a intense hard monitoring tracing on my personal social security number and all my private credit profiles. Flag any intense hard inquiries immediately. Is there a specific threat we are looking for? David asked, his professional tone shifting instantly into intense alert. My family is desperately needing $50,000, and they have an extensive history of financial forgery, I explained calmly. If they cannot bully me into signing a loan, they might be stupid enough to try and steal my identity to get it. Understood, I will lock it down right now, David confirmed. 2 intense days after locking down my credit profiles, a secure notification illuminated the large screen of my corporate phone. It was a message from an unknown number, but the syntax was intense and intensely formal. I texted him the secure address of an exclusive members-only coffee lounge located in the heart of the wealthy Chicago financial district. It was a secure, discreet place where billionaires and elite executives conducted discreet corporate business. An expensive place where Madison and my parents could never simply wander randomly in. I arrived at the exclusive lounge at 10 o'clock the intense next morning. Terrence was already seated in a secluded, leather booth in the far back corner, nursing an intense black espresso. I approached the table wearing an tailored, expensive charcoal suit that projected quiet authority. Terrence stood up out of ingrained politeness, though his sharp dark eyes were weary and guarded. My fiancé told me that the black card you used at the expensive restaurant was a basic, prepaid corporate expense card, Terrence began, his tense voice low and tight. She claimed it was given to you by a wealthy client simply to purchase bulk cleaning supplies for your pathetic maid service. As a trained attorney who handles mergers for ultra-net worth corporate clients, Terrence continued, leaning intensely forward, I know what an American Express Centurion card is. I know the staggering spending requirements. I know the initiation fees. You do not get one simply by scrubbing dirty baseboards. Cassidy. I kept my expression neutral. You are observant, Terrence. Your parents treat you with unadulterated contempt. Madison talks about you like you are a pathetic stray dog she pities. They openly humiliate you in front of strangers, yet you sat there at that tense dinner utterly unbothered, giving my powerful mother real estate loophole advice that seasoned expensive tax attorneys charge thousands of dollars an hour for. Nothing about the pathetic narrative your family is selling me adds up. None of it makes any sense. And what question are you asking me, Terrence? I inquired, keeping my intense tone gentle but firm. I am asking you who you really are, Terrence demanded. Because if Madison is lying to me about her own sister's existence, I need to know what else she is hiding before I sign a legally binding marriage certificate. I was just about to answer him when the oak door of the exclusive lounge swung open. The ambient, expensive noise in the room seemed to instantly hush. Terrence's powerful mother looked magnificent in a slate gray power suit, carrying an expensive designer leather briefcase with the undeniable authority of a commanding general. Her sharp, analytical gaze scanned the room, locked onto our secluded booth, and she marched toward us. Mother? He asked, standing up slightly. What are you doing here? Yvonne waved him down with a single elegant motion of her powerful hand. She slid into the booth right next to me, signaling the attentive waiter exclusively for a strong espresso before turning her piercing gaze to her shocked son. I am here, Terrence, because it is time you knew who you are marrying into, Yvonne stated, her smooth voice but laced with solid iron. And more importantly, it is time you knew who you have been ignoring. Terrence looked back and intensely forth between his powerful mother and me, his confusion deepening. You two know each other. Terrence, allow me to properly introduce you to Cassidy, Yvonne announced, dropping the bombshell. She is not a pathetic maid. She is the founder and chief executive officer of Luminina Estate Management. She is a titan in the commercial real estate sector. In fact, just last week, my bank signed a $100 million portfolio management contract with her corporation, Yvonne revealed. Cassidy oversees assets worth far more than Madison and your superficial future in-laws could ever even comprehend. She is a self-made powerhouse, and your pathetic fiancé has been parading her around exclusively as the family failure to massage her own pathetic Fragile ego. Terrence's sharp jaw practically unhinged. He stared at me, then at his powerful mother, the reality of my true identity crashing down on him like a tidal wave. The woman his fiancé had ordered to clean up after her was actually a corporate titan who sat in rooms with the most powerful executives in the city. Madison told me you dropped out of college, Terrence stammered, his sharp legal mind frantically trying to process the magnitude of the lie. She said you were drowning in debt. Madison projects her own insecurities exceptionally well. I replied flawlessly. I did not drop out. Our parents drained my college trust fund to pay off Madison's catastrophic shopping addictions. They forced me onto the freezing streets, and I built an empire out of the dirt they left me in. Terrence fell back against the leather booth, looking physically ill. If Madison could lie this easily, this seamlessly about her own sister's existence, the implications were terrifying. I saw the way that family treated her at that intense dinner, Yvonne said quietly. And I see the way Madison looks at your bank accounts. You are a smart man, Terrence. It is time to wake up and see the trap you are walking into. What else is she hiding, Cassidy? He demanded, his intense voice thick with rising anger. I think, Terrence, it is time you ran a comprehensive financial background check on your future bride, I told him. Because you are not going to like what you find. Terrence sat still, the sleek leather of the expensive booth creaking softly as he braced his weight against the table. I had just told him to run a comprehensive financial background check on his fake future bride, and the sheer certainty in my voice left no room for doubt. The pathetic illusion Terrence had been living in shattered. Yet he had allowed a superficial woman, with a convincing, pathetic smile to blind him to the red flags, waving right in front of his brilliant face. Madison had successfully secured her expensive $50,000 custom Parisian gown. She looked like an expensive, fake porcelain doll as she prepared to walk down the ornate aisle. I arrived discreetly 30 minutes before the expensive ceremony began. I arrived through the main iron gates in my sleek tinted black Porsche, flanked by a team of my private elite corporate security guards wearing crisp, intimidating dark suits. The string quartet began to play a traditional, expensive bridal march. Brenda and Richard sat in the prominent front row, beaming with arrogance, believing they had successfully secured their golden child's wealthy future. Terrence stood still, dressed in an expensive tailored custom tuxedo. He looked at the superficial woman standing in front of him with cold corporate detachment. If anyone present knows any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, the officiant asked formally, his voice echoing through the ballroom, speak now or forever hold your peace. I do, Terrence announced, his powerful voice ringing clearly through the microphones. A collective, shocked gasp ripped through the crowded ballroom. Brenda jumped up from her prominent seat, clutching her expensive pearls in shock. Terrence, baby, what thing are you doing? Madison whispered, her frantic voice cracking with panic. I am saving my future from a fraud, Terrence replied coldly, turning to face the shocked crowd. Over the past 3 days, I ordered my private firm to conduct a comprehensive financial and personal background check on my future bride, Terrence announced, his sharp legal voice commanding attention from the elite crowd. Madison told me she was a successful boutique owner, Terrence declared loudly. She lied, her fake pathetic business has zero revenue, and it filed for bankruptcy 6 short months ago. She told me she was debt-free, she lied. She currently possesses over $200,000 in undisclosed credit card debt, and she just illegally forged predatory loans to buy that dress she is wearing. Madison let out a loud sob, covering her made-up face with her shaking hands. The elite crowd erupted into shocked whispers, and most importantly, Terrence continued, his voice rising in anger. She lied about her own flesh and blood. She told me her older sister was a pathetic college dropout who cleaned dirty toilets for an pathetic living. She forced me to sit at an expensive engagement dinner and watch her parents publicly humiliate her own sister for sport. Your family is a illusion, Terrence spat. You are nothing but desperate grifters. The wedding is cancelled, Brenda screamed, attempting to run toward the altar. Terrence, listen to me, this is a huge misunderstanding. Cassidy lied to you. She is a jealous, pathetic maid. She manipulated you. She is not a pathetic maid. A smooth, commanding voice echoed throughout the ballroom. I stepped out of the shadows, my stunning emerald green silk suit catching the brilliant light of the crystal chandeliers. My elite security team flanked me on all sides, parting the elite crowd like the Red Sea. Madison stared at me in sheer horror. Brenda backed away, her face draining of all color. Since my mother insists on maintaining her pathetic illusions, I announced loudly, stopping 20 feet from the altar, I believe it is time to clarify the truth. The digital projection screens lining the grand ballroom suddenly illuminated brightly. They did not display the romantic wedding photos. My name is Cassidy, I announced loudly to the shocked elite crowd. I am the founder and chief executive officer of Luminina Estate Management. And 30 days ago, my corporation executed a hostile corporate takeover of the hospitality group that owned this venue. I stated smoothly, my voice echoing. I did not come here to clean your wedding venue, Madison, I declared coldly. I came here to evict you from my own property. A collective gasp ripped through the crowd. I owned the building. This private event is officially over, I commanded. You have 10 minutes to vacate my property before my elite security team escorts you off the premises. Brenda let out a scream of pure horror. Richard stared at me in shock. Madison fell to her knees on the marble altar, ruining her custom Parisian gown, sobbing. The elite Chicago crowd began to quickly exit the grand ballroom. He walked over to me. Thank you, Cassidy, Terrence said, his voice filled with profound gratitude. It was my pleasure, Terrence, I replied smoothly. I turned around and walked away. I walked out of the building, leaving my family ruined in the dirt. If you have ever survived abuse, to build your empire in the dark, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Never set yourself on fire simply to keep people warm.